The orphanage was quieter than Oliver expected. The distant sounds of children playing outside mingled with the creaking of the old building's wooden floors. His sister, Julia, had insisted he visit this place, yet he wasn't sure why. She'd simply said, "You'll understand once you're there." But for now, all Oliver felt was an overwhelming sense of being out of place. A caretaker, a stout woman with a kind face, guided him through the narrow hallways. "Most of our children are in the recreation room," she mentioned as they passed by a window overlooking a playground. Oliver nodded absent-mindedly, his mind elsewhere. He had agreed to this visit only because Julia had been adamant. After all, since Emma's death, he'd been drifting through life, avoiding emotional connections and anything that reminded him of what he'd lost. As he stepped into the room, the sight before him was unexpectedly mundane. Children were busy drawing, laughing, and building blocks. Nothing seemed unusual. He scanned the room slowly until his eyes caught something unusual. A young girl sitting alone at a small table, holding a photograph. Oliver's breath caught when he realized the photograph was of him. His heart raced. He approached cautiously, his footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. The little girl, probably no older than 7, had long, tangled hair and large, curious eyes. Her clothes were slightly oversized, suggesting hand-me-downs, but it was the expression on her face that intrigued him most, a strange mix of determination and innocence. Oliver kneeled to meet her eye level. "Hello," he said, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "I'm Oliver." The girl stared at him, wide-eyed but unafraid. "I'm Chloe," she answered, her voice barely audible but clear. "What's that you have there?" he asked, nodding toward the photo. Chloe's small hand tightened around it. "It's you," she said simply. Oliver's confusion deepened. "Yes, it is. But why do you have a picture of me?" Chloe hesitated, as if unsure how much she should reveal. Then she leaned forward slightly and whispered, "The angel told me to find you." An unsettling chill ran down Oliver's spine. "An angel?" he echoed, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Chloe nodded earnestly, pointing to a spot on her left arm. "It said you have this too." And there it was, a birthmark identical to his own, a small crescent shape on her arm. Oliver's mind swirled with questions. Could this be a bizarre coincidence, or was there more to it? "Where did you get this picture?" he asked urgently, feeling a sudden surge of protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. Chloe's gaze didn't waver. "It was in my things when I came here. I don't know where it's from, but the angel told me it's from you. You're supposed to help me find her." Oliver felt a mix of disbelief, shock, and a strange, inexplicable connection to this child. "Find who?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. The girl's voice was soft but certain, the woman with golden hair, the one who cries at night. "I think she's my mother." Oliver's heart nearly stopped. Emma had golden hair, and the image of her crying haunted his dreams since she had vanished, presumed dead. But could it be possible she was alive? Could Chloe really be his daughter, lost somewhere in the chaos of his grief? A desperate urgency took hold of him. "Chloe," he said, trying to keep his voice steady, "I'll help you find her. I promise." Oliver sat alone in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel as if holding on to reality itself. The orphanage loomed behind him, a decrepit reminder of how life could twist in unexpected ways. His mind was still reeling from what Chloe had told him. The photo, the birthmark, the mention of Emma. Could it all be connected? He picked up his phone, his fingers trembling slightly. Julia's name flashed on the screen, and he hesitated before pressing call. "Oliver," Julia answered on the first ring. "Did you go? Did you meet her?" Oliver struggled to find the words. "Yes, I met her. Julia. She has my birthmark. And she was holding a picture of me. She even said something about Emma." There was a pause, the weight of it heavy with both disbelief and hope. "Oliver, are you saying—" "I don't know what I'm saying," he interrupted, his voice raw. "But I need answers." Julia's voice softened, concern evident. "I understand. But be careful, Oliver. This is a fragile situation, especially for Chloe. She's been through a lot." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I know. I'll be careful." The next day, Oliver found himself drawn back to the orphanage. Chloe was waiting for him, a faint smile breaking across her face when she saw him. "You came back," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and relief. "Yes," he replied, crouching down to her level. "I want to know more about you." "About us?" Chloe's small fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "I don't remember much before the orphanage, just that I was always waiting for someone. They said my mother left me here, but I don't remember her face." Oliver felt a pang in his chest, a mix of sorrow and anger. "And the angel?" he asked, his voice gentle but persistent. "She's not like a real angel," Chloe explained, her eyes distant. "More like a voice. She talks to me when I'm scared. She says you're important, and that you'll help find my mother." The more Chloe spoke, the more a gnawing certainty took root in Oliver. Emma's disappearance had always felt unresolved, as if the truth had slipped through the cracks of reality. And now, here was Chloe, a girl who could be the missing piece. "Chloe," he began cautiously, "do you know where your mother might be? Or where you were before you came here?" Chloe shook her head, frustration etched on her face. "I just remember a room. It was dark, and I was scared. Then someone brought me here." Oliver's heart ached at the thought of this little girl, alone and scared, waiting in the dark. "I promise I'll find out what happened," he said, his voice firm. As the days passed, Oliver became a constant presence at the orphanage. He and Chloe spent hours together, talking, laughing, and slowly building a bond that felt both natural and surreal. She seemed to trust him more each day, and Oliver found himself increasingly protective of her. One afternoon, while they were sitting on a bench outside, Chloe suddenly asked, "Do you think she's still alive?" Oliver's breath caught, knowing exactly who Chloe meant. He looked into her wide, hopeful eyes, unsure of how to answer. "I hope so," he said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper. "And I'll do everything I can to find her." It was the first real promise he'd made to anyone since Emma had disappeared, and he felt its weight. But it wasn't just a promise to Chloe, it was a promise to himself. He decided to dig into Chloe's past. After all, there had to be records, hospital visits, birth certificates, something that could confirm if she was his child. With renewed determination, Oliver contacted a private investigator he knew from his business days. His name was Marcus, a man with a reputation for finding what others couldn't. "Oliver," Marcus greeted him over the phone. "Long time. What can I do for you?" Oliver got straight to the point. "I need you to look into a child's background. Her name is Chloe, and she's currently at an orphanage." "An orphanage?" Marcus asked, his tone sharp. "What's the connection to you?" "I think she might be my daughter," Oliver confessed, the words sounding both strange and true as they left his mouth. There was a brief silence before Marcus spoke again. "All right, I'll see what I can find. But these things take time. Just hurry," Oliver urged, feeling an urgency he couldn't quite explain. Over the following days, Oliver tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. He still visited Chloe regularly, trying to understand more about her past while simultaneously grappling with the possibility of Emma being alive. Every time he saw Chloe's face, he couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was somehow out there, waiting for him too. Then, one evening, Oliver received a call from Marcus. His voice was low and serious. "Oliver, I found something. It's about Chloe's admission to the orphanage." The paperwork was unusual. No clear birth records, no hospital records, and the woman who left her there didn't leave a name. "But there's one thing. I found a possible match for Chloe's DNA in the national database." Oliver's heart pounded. "And the match is to someone who went missing 2 years ago. Her name was Emma Daniels." Oliver felt his legs weaken, and he leaned against the wall for support. "Emma," he whispered, his mind reeling. Was it possible? Could Emma really be alive? "I can't confirm anything yet," Marcus cautioned, "but it's enough to keep digging." Oliver's thoughts were chaotic, torn between the hope that Emma might still be alive and the fear of what that would mean. "Keep me updated," he managed to say, his voice hoarse. As he hung up the phone, Oliver looked around his empty apartment. He knew one thing for certain. He had to protect Chloe, no matter what it took. And if Emma was truly out there, somewhere in the shadows of the past, he would find her. The The search had only just begun. Oliver stood in front of an old wooden chest in the attic of his house, dust swirling around as he lifted the heavy lid. This chest hadn't been opened in years, untouched since the days when Emma had filled it with keepsakes. Now, it was a time capsule of their life together, filled with memories both precious and painful. He needed to dig into Emma's past, hoping to find something he might have missed before, anything that could offer clues about Chloe. He reached inside and pulled out a stack of photographs, some faded and worn. His hands trembled as he picked up an album filled with pictures of Emma. There she was, smiling back at him, her golden hair shining in the sunlight. The sight stirred an ache in his chest, a mixture of longing and regret. As he flipped through the pages, he noticed something odd. A series of photos from around the time she went missing, but with no notes or explanations. Among the pictures, he found one that caught his eye. Emma standing next to an unfamiliar woman, her expression tense. Oliver felt a surge of curiosity. He didn't recognize the woman, but something about her presence seemed significant. There was an uneasy look in Emma's eyes, as if she were hiding something. He turned the photo over, hoping for a clue. Scribbled on the back were the words, Benson Street, April 2018. He pulled out his phone and quickly searched for Benson Street. It was located in a rough part of town, known for shady businesses and abandoned warehouses. Why had Emma been there? And who was the woman with her? His instincts told him that this lead was worth pursuing. As he prepared to leave, he paused by a small framed photo of him and Emma on their wedding day. "I'm coming for you, Emma," he whispered, determination hardening his voice. Arriving at Benson Street, Oliver was struck by the desolation. The street was lined with old, boarded-up buildings, graffiti covering the crumbling walls. It was eerily quiet, with only the occasional sound of a distant car echoing through the empty streets. He parked his car a few blocks away and continued on foot, his senses alert. He soon found himself standing in front of a rundown warehouse. The building looked abandoned, with broken windows and a rusty chain blocking the entrance. Yet something felt off. He noticed faint footprints leading inside, as if someone had been there recently. Without hesitation, he climbed over the chain and carefully pushed open the creaky metal door. Inside, the air was stale and musty. He moved cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Suddenly, a voice from the shadows broke the silence. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" It was a man's voice, rough and demanding. Oliver turned to see a tall, wiry figure emerging from the darkness. The man had a suspicious look in his eyes, his face half covered by a hood. "I'm looking for someone," Oliver replied, trying to sound calm but firm. "A woman named Emma Daniels. Do you know her?" The man's expression darkened. "No one uses real names here, and you should know better than to come asking questions." But Oliver stood his ground, his jaw clenched. "I have to find her. I believe she's connected to a little girl named Chloe." At the mention of Chloe, the man's eyes flickered with something, a hint of recognition, maybe even fear. "I don't know anything about that," he muttered, turning to walk away. Desperation surged through Oliver. He grabbed the man's arm. "Please, if you know anything, I need to know. It's about my wife and my child." The man pulled away roughly. "Look, I don't know much, but I heard some things, whispers about a woman who tried to get out of the business. If she's the one you're talking about, she made some powerful enemies. And trust me, you don't want to mess with them." Oliver's heart sank. "What business?" "Trafficking," the man answered bluntly. "People come and go here, most of them not by choice. If she was involved, it's bad news." The words hit Oliver like a punch. He felt both sick and enraged at the same time. Was it possible that Emma had somehow been caught up in such a dark world? And what about Chloe? Was she a victim of this horror too? He pressed further, his voice hoarse. "Do you know where she might be now?" The man hesitated before speaking. "I heard rumors about a place on the outskirts of town, a safe house where some of the women were kept. But it's dangerous, heavily guarded. If she's there, you'll need more than just determination to get her out." Oliver nodded, a cold determination settling in. "Thank you." The man gave a bitter laugh. "Don't thank me. You're walking into a nightmare." With that warning ringing in his ears, Oliver left the warehouse. His mind was racing, filled with images of Emma trapped, Chloe alone, and a sinister network pulling the strings. He knew the risks were growing, but he couldn't turn back now. Back at his apartment, he found a message from Marcus on his phone. "Got more information," it read. "Meet me at the usual spot." Oliver drove to a small diner on the edge of town, a place he and Marcus often used for discreet meetings. Marcus was already there, a thick folder sitting on the table between them. "What did you find?" Oliver asked urgently as he slid into the booth. Marcus's face was grim. "It's worse than we thought. Emma was last seen with a known trafficker. It seems she was trying to protect someone, possibly Chloe. But the trail goes cold after that." Oliver's hands tightened into fists. "And Chloe? Is she really my daughter?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, the DNA confirms it. She's your child, Oliver." The confirmation brought a wave of conflicting emotions. Relief, joy, fear, and anger all swirled inside him. Then Emma. She tried to save Chloe, didn't she? Marcus nodded. "It looks like it, but it also means she's in grave danger. These people don't just let anyone walk away." Oliver leaned back, feeling the weight of it all. He had come here searching for answers, but the truth was far darker than he had imagined. He looked at Marcus, his voice low but filled with resolve. "I have to get them both back, whatever it takes." Marcus's eyes were steady. "I'll help you, but you need to be prepared for what's coming. This isn't just about finding Emma, it's about surviving." Oliver nodded. "I know, but I won't stop. Not until they're both safe." The morning was cold and gray as Oliver parked his car a few blocks away from the safe house Marcus had mentioned. It was located on the outskirts of the city, hidden among a cluster of dilapidated buildings. The area was a stark reminder of forgotten promises, a place where people slipped through the cracks and shadows ruled the streets. Oliver's heart raced with anticipation and fear, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He was ready to confront whatever lay ahead. He surveyed the building from a distance, noting the heavy security presence. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter, both armed and vigilant. A chain-link fence with barbed wire topped the enclosure, making a direct approach nearly impossible. He needed to be smart about this, not reckless. As he studied the guards' patterns, a figure appeared at his side. It was Marcus, dressed in dark, inconspicuous clothing. "I figured you'd try to come here alone," Marcus said quietly, his tone a mix of frustration and admiration. Oliver shot him a sideways glance. "You know me too well, but I can't afford to wait any longer, Marcus. Emma and Chloe might be inside." Marcus nodded, his face set in grim determination. "I've got a plan. It's risky, but it's our best shot." He handed Oliver a small earpiece and a compact, black handgun. "We'll split up. I'll create a distraction near the back entrance while you make your way inside through the side window. It's the least guarded spot, but you'll have to be quick." Oliver took the gun, feeling its cold weight in his hand. It was a tool he'd hoped never to need again, but desperate times left no room for hesitation. "Let's do this," he agreed, his voice steady. As they moved toward the building, Oliver felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that had once been part of his life during his days in corporate takeovers. Only this time, it was more than just business. It was personal, deeply personal. Marcus moved first, slipping into the shadows near the back entrance. Moments later, a loud clatter echoed from behind the building, followed by shouts from the guards. The distraction worked. The 2 guards rushed toward the noise, leaving the side of the building momentarily unguarded. Oliver seized the opportunity. He sprinted to the side window Marcus had pointed out. It was partially open, just enough for him to slide through. He landed inside with a quiet thud, crouching low to stay hidden. The interior of the building was dimly lit, the air stale and filled with a mix of sweat and fear. He moved cautiously, his footsteps silent on the concrete floor. He passed several empty rooms, each one more desolate than the last. Then, faint voices reached his ears, muffled, urgent whispers coming from the end of the corridor. Oliver pressed himself against the wall, listening carefully. He could make out bits of a conversation, something about the shipment and keeping the women under control. His heart sank, knowing exactly what those words implied. He edged closer, peering around the corner. Inside the room, he saw several women, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow with fear. 2 men stood guard, their expressions cold and businesslike. Oliver's heart raced as he scanned the faces, desperately searching for Emma. But she wasn't there. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his arm from behind. Oliver spun around, ready to fight, but he stopped short when he saw who it was. A young woman, barely in her 20s, her face bruised and eyes filled with desperation. "Are you here for someone?" she whispered urgently. Oliver nodded, keeping his voice low. "Yes, I'm looking for Emma Daniels. Have you seen her?" The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Emma, she was here. She was trying to help some of us escape, but they took her away last night. Said she was causing too much trouble." Oliver felt a mixture of relief and panic. "Do you know where they took her?" The woman shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I don't know, but she kept talking about a little girl. Is she your daughter?" "Yes," Oliver confirmed, his voice cracking. "Do you know anything about her?" The woman hesitated before speaking again. "There was a child here a few months ago. I think her name was Chloe. Emma was trying to protect her, but the men running this place found out. They moved the girl to another location before Emma could do anything." Oliver's chest tightened with rage and despair. "Where is Chloe now?" he pressed, his desperation evident. "I don't know," the woman repeated, her voice shaking. "But I heard the guards mention a place called the Holding, somewhere further up north. It's where they keep the high-risk cases, people they want to control." Oliver clenched his fists, fury burning inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with both gratitude and a fierce determination. "I'll get you all out of here. But I need to find Emma and Chloe first." The woman nodded, her eyes filled with a flicker of hope. "Just be careful. They're dangerous, and they won't hesitate to kill." Oliver nodded, then turned to leave. As he made his way back toward the exit, he caught sight of Marcus signaling to him from down the hall. Oliver approached quickly, whispering, "Emma was here, but they moved her. And Chloe's in another location called the Holding." Marcus's face darkened. "That's a heavily fortified place, Oliver. It's not going to be easy." "I know," Oliver replied, "but I have to try. I can't leave them in this nightmare." They managed to make it out of the building undetected, but Oliver's mind was already on the next step. He couldn't waste any more time. Every minute meant more danger for Emma and Chloe. Back in his car, Oliver pulled out his phone and called Julia. She answered on the second ring, her voice filled with concern. "Oliver, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he assured her quickly. "But things are worse than I thought." Emma tried to protect Chloe, but she got caught up in something much bigger. And now Chloe's in a place called the Holding. Julia's silence was filled with shock and fear. "Oliver, this is too dangerous. You can't do this alone." "I don't have a choice," Oliver replied, his voice resolute. "I have to get them back, Julia. I promised." There was a pause, then Julia spoke again, her voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Then I'm coming with you. We'll need all the help we can get." Oliver hesitated, torn between wanting to keep his sister safe and knowing he needed all the help he could get. "All right," he agreed finally. "But we have to be smart about this. No more risks than necessary." The conversation ended, and Oliver stared out the windshield into the darkness ahead. He knew the road to the Holding would be filled with dangers and unknowns, but he couldn't let fear hold him back. Emma and Chloe were out there, somewhere, waiting for him. As he started the car and drove toward an uncertain future, one thing was clear. He was in this fight until the very end. The early morning fog hung heavy over the deserted road as Oliver drove north, Julia sitting silently beside him. The air was thick with tension, both of them aware that they were heading into a dangerous unknown. The Holding was more than just a place. It was a symbol of how deeply this nightmare reached, how cruelly it had torn apart their lives. Julia broke the silence. "Are you sure about this, Oliver? We're not exactly trained for whatever this is." Oliver's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I know, but we can't turn back now. Emma and Chloe are somewhere inside that hellhole, and I won't leave them there." Julia nodded, though her face betrayed a mix of fear and determination. "I know. I can't lose you too. Oliver reached out, his hand briefly touching Julia's. You won't, he promised, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing her or himself. As they approached the outskirts of the industrial zone where the holding was rumored to be located, Oliver pulled the car into an abandoned parking lot. We'll go the rest of the way on foot, he instructed. Less chance of being spotted. They made their way through a series of overgrown pathways, keeping low and moving quietly. Marcus had sent them details of the layout, crude sketches based on hearsay and outdated information, but it was the best they had. According to Marcus, the complex was heavily guarded, with multiple entry points, all monitored by cameras. Finally, they reached a spot where they could see the building, a massive, nondescript warehouse surrounded by tall fences and patrolled by armed guards. Oliver felt a surge of dread as he took in the sight. This is it, he muttered, his voice low. Julia adjusted her backpack, her face pale but determined. So, what's the plan? Oliver explained quietly, we split up. I'll create a distraction near the main gate while you slip through the side entrance. We'll meet inside near the central stairwell. Stay out of sight and keep moving, no matter what. Julia's eyes flashed with fear, but she nodded. Be careful, Oliver. You too, he replied, his voice softer now. And Julia, if anything happens to me, get Chloe out of here. Promise me. Julia's eyes welled up, but she quickly wiped away the tears. I promise. Oliver took a deep breath, then made his way toward the main gate, keeping to the shadows. He pulled out a small smoke bomb Marcus had given him, a makeshift device meant to create confusion. He ignited it and hurled it toward the guard post. Within moments, a plume of thick gray smoke began to fill the air, accompanied by shouts and the sound of running footsteps. Using the chaos to his advantage, Oliver sprinted toward the side of the building. He reached a service door and managed to pry it open with a crowbar he'd brought along. The door creaked slightly, but the noise was drowned out by the commotion outside. He slipped inside, his senses on high alert. The interior of the holding was just as bleak as he'd imagined. Long, dimly lit hallways with metal doors on either side. He moved quickly but cautiously, keeping his steps silent. He reached the central stairwell, scanning for any sign of Julia. A moment later, she appeared, her face flushed but determined. Any trouble? He asked. Just one guard, she replied, slightly out of breath. I managed to avoid him. Good, Oliver said. Let's move. They crept down the stairwell, heading deeper into the building. The air grew colder and more oppressive with each step, the faint sounds of distant sobs echoing through the corridors. It was clear that this place held more than just Emma and Chloe. There were others trapped here too, victims of a ruthless network. As they reached the lower level, Oliver spotted a heavy metal door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. He motioned for Julia to stay behind as he approached cautiously. Peering through the gap, he saw a small room with a few women inside, their faces marked by fear and exhaustion. His heart clenched, but none of them was Emma. He opened the door wider and stepped inside. I'm here to help, he said in a low, urgent tone. Has anyone seen a woman named Emma Daniels? Blonde hair, about this tall, he asked, raising his hand to indicate Emma's height. The women exchanged hesitant glances before one of them spoke. She was here, but they moved her upstairs yesterday. They said she was becoming too much of a problem. Thank you, Oliver said quickly. Stay here. Help is coming. He closed the door behind him and turned to Julia, who had been watching anxiously from the hallway. She's upstairs, he whispered. Let's go. The two of them moved quickly, finding a service elevator at the end of the hall. It creaked ominously as it ascended, but they had no other choice. The ride was slow and filled with tension, the dim light inside flickering intermittently. When the doors opened, they were met by a grim sight. A larger room filled with makeshift cages, each one containing women or children, some silent, others sobbing quietly. The sight of so much suffering was almost overwhelming, but Oliver forced himself to focus. Emma, he whispered to himself, scanning the room. And then he saw her. Emma, sitting in a corner of one of the cages, her hair tangled but still unmistakably golden. Emma, he called softly, rushing forward. Emma's head snapped up, her eyes widening with a mix of shock and disbelief. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He fumbled with the lock on the cage, his hands shaking. "It's me. I'm here. We're getting you out." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she reached through the bars, her fingers brushing against his. "You found me," she sobbed. "I thought I'd never see you again." "I promised you." "Emma," Oliver said, finally breaking the lock. He pulled the cage door open and helped her out, holding her tightly for a moment. "But we're not safe yet. Where's Chloe?" Emma's expression shifted to one of fear. "They moved her," she said urgently. "She's in a separate wing, guarded heavily. They know she's important." Oliver turned to Julia. "Stay with Emma. I'll get Chloe." "No, Oliver," Emma insisted, her voice stronger now. "I'm coming with you. We'll do this together." There was no time to argue. "All right," he agreed. "But be ready for anything." The three of them moved swiftly through the corridors, following Emma's directions. The sound of approaching footsteps made Oliver's pulse quicken, but they managed to duck into a side room just in time. He peered out cautiously, watching as two guards passed by. "Almost there," Emma whispered, pointing toward a heavy steel door at the end of the hall. Oliver nodded, his face set with determination. This was it, the moment they'd been fighting for, risking everything for. He took a deep breath and moved forward, knowing that beyond that door lay the final piece of the nightmare. And perhaps, finally, the chance for their family to be whole again. Oliver's heart thundered in his chest as he approached the heavy steel door. He glanced back at Emma and Julia, their faces pale but resolved. The weight of the moment bore down on him. This was the final stretch. Behind this door, Chloe could be waiting, scared and alone. He couldn't afford to fail. He motioned for them to stay close as he carefully turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway bathed in dim, flickering fluorescent light. Oliver scanned the corridor, finding it eerily quiet. At the far end, a metal door stood slightly ajar, and from within, he could hear faint cries. "That must be it," Emma whispered, her voice a mix of hope and fear. Oliver nodded, signaling for silence. He moved forward with measured steps, his body tense and ready for anything. The closer they got to the door, the clearer the sounds became. Soft sobs, like those of a child. When they reached the entrance, Oliver peered inside. The room was dimly lit, with several small cots lining the walls. His eyes searched frantically until he saw her. Chloe, curled up on one of the cots, her tiny body trembling. "Chloe," Oliver whispered, stepping into the room. The little girl's head snapped up, her eyes wide with both recognition and disbelief. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and filled with both hope and confusion. Oliver's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me." He rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms. Chloe clung to him, her grip surprisingly strong for such a small child. "I was so scared," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I thought you'd never come." "I'm here now," Oliver assured her, his voice breaking. "I'm never leaving you again." Emma knelt beside them, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to touch Chloe's hair. "You're safe now, baby," she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and pain. Chloe's eyes widened as she looked at Emma, confusion turning into recognition. "Are you my mom?" Emma's face crumpled, and she pulled Chloe into a tight embrace. "Yes, Chloe, I'm your mom," she choked out, her voice barely holding steady. "I've been trying to find you for so long." Chloe buried her face into Emma's shoulder, her small body shaking with tears. Oliver felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew they weren't out of danger yet. They had to get out of the building before the guards realized what was happening. "Come on," Oliver urged, gently pulling Emma and Chloe to their feet. "We need to move now." As they turned to leave, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Panic surged through Oliver. He scanned the room, looking for an escape route, but there were no windows, no alternative exits. The only way out was the door they'd come through. Julia quickly pulled a metal cabinet in front of the door, creating a temporary barrier. "This won't hold for long," she said, her voice urgent. Oliver's mind raced. They had no weapons, no backup, and now, No time. He pulled Chloe close to him, keeping his voice calm. Listen to me, Chloe. We're going to run as fast as we can. Hold on to Mommy's hand and don't let go. Okay? Chloe nodded, her eyes wide but determined. Okay, Daddy. Emma squeezed Oliver's hand briefly, her eyes filled with both fear and love. We'll make it, she said, more to reassure herself than anyone else. Oliver took a deep breath, adrenaline surging through him. He motioned to Julia. Get ready to push the cabinet when I say. The footsteps grew louder, and then came the sound of pounding on the door. Open up, a rough voice demanded from the other side. Now, Oliver shouted. Julia pushed the cabinet aside, and Oliver yanked the door open. He was met by two guards, their expressions a mix of surprise and anger. Oliver's instincts kicked in. He swung the door hard, slamming it into one of the guards. The other lunged forward, but Emma reacted swiftly, grabbing a nearby metal chair and swinging it with all her strength. The guard stumbled back, momentarily disoriented. Run, Oliver shouted. They sprinted down the corridor, Chloe's small hand clasped tightly in Emma's. The alarm blared overhead, its piercing sound echoing through the building. Oliver's legs burned as he ran, his only focus on getting his family to safety. They burst through the main stairwell and began descending, their footsteps echoing loudly. Two more guards appeared below, blocking their path. Oliver barely had time to think. He shoved Chloe toward Emma and charged forward. He tackled one of the guards, slamming him into the wall. Julia, close behind, grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprayed the second guard, blinding him momentarily. Go, go, Oliver yelled, his voice hoarse. They continued down the stairs, bursting out into a loading bay filled with crates and abandoned vehicles. Marcus was waiting, crouched behind a van. His face was tense but focused. Get in, he yelled, throwing open the back doors. Oliver and Emma scrambled inside with Chloe, while Julia slid into the front seat next to Marcus. The engine roared to life, and they sped off, the tires screeching against the pavement. Gunshots rang out behind them, but the van's bulletproof exterior held. Chloe clung to Emma, her body still trembling. Are we safe now? She asked, her voice small and frightened. Emma held her tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Yes, sweetie, we're safe. Oliver's body finally began to relax, though his mind was still racing. He turned to Marcus. Do they know who I am? Marcus nodded grimly. They will. You've made enemies tonight, Oliver. Big ones. Oliver exhaled slowly, his jaw clenched. I don't care. As long as Chloe and Emma are safe. Marcus gave a small, approving nod. You did good tonight. But this isn't over. We'll need to keep moving, stay ahead of them. I know, Oliver replied. He looked back at Chloe, her eyes now heavy with exhaustion. But for now, we have each other. As the van sped through the darkness, a strange sense of calm settled over Oliver. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile but real hope that they could rebuild what had been broken. The road ahead would be uncertain and dangerous, but they were together now, and that was all that mattered. The van roared down the deserted highway, its engine humming steadily. The distant city lights faded behind them as Marcus drove with single-minded focus, navigating through back roads and hidden routes to avoid detection. The adrenaline that had fueled them during the escape began to wane, replaced by a heavy silence. Oliver sat in the back, holding Chloe tightly on his lap. Her breathing had finally steadied. Her small body slumped against his chest in exhaustion. He ran a hand gently through her tangled hair, feeling the weight of all they'd been through. Emma was beside him, her eyes never leaving Chloe's face. It was as if she were afraid that if she looked away, Chloe might disappear again. Where are we going? Julia finally asked, breaking the silence. Marcus glanced at her briefly, his face grim. I have a safe house. It's out of town, well hidden. We can lay low there for a few days until we figure out our next move. Emma looked at Marcus, her voice tinged with both gratitude and wariness. Thank you for helping us. I know you didn't have to. Marcus shrugged, keeping his eyes on the road. Oliver's a good man, and I've seen what those people do. No one should go through that, especially not a child. Emma's eyes softened, but Oliver could see the flicker of sadness behind them. "What happened, Emma?" he asked quietly, unable to keep the question at bay any longer. "How did you end up there? And why didn't you come back to me?" Emma's shoulders slumped, the weight of the past finally catching up to her. "It's a long story," she began, her voice filled with a mix of regret and pain. "When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. We'd been going through so much, and I didn't know if I could handle it. I thought maybe it would be better if I left." Oliver's heart twisted. He'd replayed that night so many times in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. "But why didn't you tell me? I would have done anything, Emma, anything." "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But then things got complicated. After Chloe was born, I tried to make a life for us, but the people I got involved with weren't who they seemed. When I realized they were dangerous, it was too late. They threatened Chloe, said they'd take her from me if I didn't cooperate." Oliver felt a surge of anger mixed with helplessness. "I should have been there. I should have protected you both." Emma reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "You couldn't have known. And I tried to keep Chloe safe, but they found out she was yours. They thought they could use her to control me, maybe even get to you." Oliver's jaw tightened. "But why didn't you try to contact me? There must have been a way." "I did," Emma said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I sent letters, tried to call, but they intercepted everything. I was trapped, and all I could think about was keeping Chloe alive. Then, when I tried to escape with her, they caught us. That's when they separated us, and I ended up at the holding. I didn't know where they'd taken her until I heard rumors from the other women." Oliver's heart ached at the thought of Emma fighting alone for so long, the fear and desperation she must have felt. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I should have found you sooner." Emma shook her head, wiping away tears. "You found us now, Oliver. That's what matters." The van continued down the dark, winding road, the silence now filled with unspoken promises. Chloe shifted in Oliver's lap, her eyes fluttering open. "Where are we going, Daddy?" she asked sleepily. Oliver kissed the top of her head. "Somewhere safe, sweetheart. We're going to be okay." The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. When they finally reached the safe house, it was nearly dawn. The small cabin was nestled deep within a forest, surrounded by thick trees that offered natural cover. Marcus parked the van behind the cabin and cut the engine. "Stay inside," he instructed. "There's enough food and supplies for a few days. I'll be back to check on you, but I need to make sure we're not being followed." Oliver nodded, his gratitude evident. "Thank you, Marcus. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Just keep your family safe." Marcus replied simply, then disappeared into the early morning mist. The inside of the cabin was sparse but comfortable. Emma led Chloe to a small bedroom, helping her settle into a warm bed. Chloe's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she looked up at Emma, her voice small. "Are we really safe here, Mommy?" Emma's eyes filled with tenderness. "Yes, my love. We're safe. I promise." Once Chloe was asleep, Oliver and Emma sat in the small living room, the weight of the past hours still pressing heavily on them. Oliver broke the silence first. "I can't believe we're finally together. It feels unreal." Emma's eyes were distant, as if she were still processing everything. "I know, but there's so much we have to figure out, Oliver. Those people won't stop looking for us, and we have to find a way to disappear." Oliver's expression hardened. "We'll do whatever it takes. I've got some old contacts who can help us get new identities, maybe even a way out of the country if we need it." Emma looked at him, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "Do you think we can really escape? That they won't find us again?" "I don't know," Oliver admitted, "but I know one thing. I won't let anyone take you or Chloe away from me again. We're in this together now, Emma." Emma's eyes softened, and she reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I believe you," she said quietly, "and I trust you." For the first time in a long while, a sense of peace washed over Oliver. It was fragile, but it was there. He knew the road ahead would be filled with uncertainty, but as long as they were together, they had a chance. The sun was just beginning to rise, its pale light filtering through the trees and casting a soft glow over the cabin. Oliver and Emma sat there, hand in hand, as the new day dawned. It wasn't the end of their fight, but it was the beginning of something they hadn't dared to hope for in years. A chance for a new start, a chance to rebuild their family. And this time, Oliver swore to himself he wouldn't let anything tear them apart again. The morning sun crept through the thin curtains of the safe house, casting a soft, golden light across the small living room. Oliver sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing the rim of a coffee mug as he stared out the window. He hadn't slept much. Every creak of the floorboards and rustle of the trees outside had sent him into a heightened state of alert, his senses still raw from the events of the past few days. Emma joined him, her movements quiet so as not to wake Chloe. Her face was drawn, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but there was a flicker of hope that hadn't been there before. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from Oliver. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked softly, her voice still hoarse from yesterday's ordeal. "Not really," Oliver admitted. "My mind's been racing. I keep thinking about everything we need to do to keep Chloe safe." Emma nodded, her eyes downcast. "I've been thinking the same thing. We're not out of danger yet, Oliver. Those people won't just let us go." "I know," he replied, his voice filled with determination. "But we have a head start, and Marcus will keep them off our trail for as long as he can. We just need to figure out our next move." Emma hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the handle of her cup. "Do you really think we can disappear? Just start over somewhere else?" Oliver leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Yes, I do. But it's not going to be easy. We'll need new identities, a new life. It means leaving everything behind. Our past, our friends, everything. Are you ready for that?" Emma's gaze met his, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "I am," she said, her voice firm. "As long as we're together, I can handle it." At that moment, the sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Chloe appeared in the doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Morning," she mumbled, her voice small. Emma immediately went to her, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Morning, sweetie. Did you sleep well?" Chloe nodded, her head resting against Emma's shoulder. "Yes, but I had a bad dream." Emma's face softened with concern. "What was it about?" Chloe looked up at Oliver, her eyes wide. "There were bad men, and they were trying to take you away again." Oliver's heart twisted, the innocence of her words piercing him. He crouched down to her level, taking her hands in his. "That won't happen, Chloe. I promise. We're not going anywhere without you." Chloe seemed to take comfort in his words, but there was still a lingering fear in her eyes. "Will we stay here forever?" "No," Oliver said gently. "We're going to find a new place, a safer place. Somewhere where no one can find us." Chloe's lips trembled slightly, but she managed a small nod. "Okay, Daddy." After breakfast, Oliver and Emma gathered around the small table, their voices hushed as they planned their next steps. Julia joined them, her face a mix of exhaustion and fierce determination. "I've been thinking," she began, "about where we could go. I have an old friend in Canada who owes me a favor. It's not a guarantee, but it's a start." Oliver nodded thoughtfully. "Canada could work. It's far enough, and we could blend in easier. But we need to be prepared. We'll need new documents, new names." Emma's face grew serious. "I know someone who can help with that. A woman I met while trying to escape. She has connections, and she's trustworthy. I haven't spoken to her in months, but if she's still in the area, she might be our best chance. Do you think she'll help us?" Julia asked, her voice filled with cautious hope. Emma nodded slowly. "If I can find her, yes. She's been through a lot herself, and she knows what's at stake." They agreed that Emma would try to make contact while Oliver stayed behind with Chloe and Julia. It was risky, but there was no other choice. They couldn't afford to delay any longer. Time was their enemy, and every moment they stayed in one place increased the likelihood of being found. That afternoon, Emma prepared to leave. She wore a simple jacket and a hat to cover her hair, hoping to blend in as much as possible. Oliver stood by the door, his face lined with worry. "Be careful," he said, his voice low. "If anything feels off, get out of there. We'll figure something else out." Emma nodded, her eyes steady. I will. I promise. Before she left, she crouched down in front of Chloe, who was sitting on the couch, clutching a small stuffed animal. I'll be back soon. Okay. Sweetie, I just need to see someone who can help us. Chloe's eyes were wide with fear. You'll come back, right? Yes, Emma assured her, giving her a warm, reassuring hug. I'll come back. As Emma stepped out into the chilly afternoon, Oliver watched from the window, his chest tightening with every step she took away from the house. The waiting was agonizing, each minute feeling like an eternity. Chloe sensed his anxiety. Will Mommy be okay? Oliver turned to her, forcing a smile. Yes, Chloe. She'll be okay. She's strong, just like you. Hours passed slowly, the sun sinking lower in the sky. Oliver paced the small living room, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Then, finally, he heard footsteps approaching the front door. He opened it, relief washing over him as he saw Emma standing there, breathless but unharmed. I found her, Emma announced, her voice tinged with both excitement and exhaustion. She's willing to help, but we need to move quickly. She can arrange for new documents by tomorrow, but it'll cost more than we expected. Oliver felt a surge of hope. We'll make it work, whatever it takes. Emma's eyes softened. I know it's a lot, Oliver, but we're so close. That night, as they prepared to leave the next morning, Chloe climbed into bed between Oliver and Emma, her small body nestled between them. Are we really leaving tomorrow? She asked sleepily. Yes, Emma whispered, kissing the top of Chloe's head. And we're going to start a new life, somewhere safe. Just the three of us. Oliver felt a lump form in his throat. He reached out, taking Emma's hand in his. We're a family again, he said quietly, and nothing will ever take that away from us. For the first time in what felt like forever, Oliver allowed himself to believe in a future, one where fear wasn't their constant companion, where Chloe could grow up free of shadows. As he drifted off to sleep, he held on to that hope tightly, knowing that tomorrow marked the beginning of a new chapter. And this time, they were ready for whatever came next. The following morning arrived with a heavy mist blanketing the forest around the cabin. Oliver was up before dawn, the anxiety of what lay ahead robbing him of any real rest. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake Chloe or Emma. Julia was already in the kitchen, her face pale in the dim light. Everything set? Oliver asked in a low voice, his tone more businesslike than usual. Julia nodded, sliding a small stack of documents across the table. New passports, IDs, and cash. Emma's contact came through as promised. Oliver picked up one of the passports, examining the unfamiliar names printed inside. Logan Harris, Emily Harris, and Lily Harris. It felt strange to see their new identities, but he knew this was the only way forward. Canada, then? Julia asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Yeah, Oliver confirmed. Once we cross the border, we'll head to a small town where we can lay low. It's remote, but big enough to blend in. Emma entered the room, Chloe trailing behind her, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Is it time? She asked, her voice soft but filled with a mix of anticipation and fear. Oliver crouched down to Chloe's level, his expression gentle. Yes, it's time. We're going on a big adventure today, okay? But it might be a little scary at first. Chloe's eyes, still heavy with sleep, widened a bit. Will we be safe there, Daddy? Yes, Oliver said, his voice firm. We'll be safe, but we have to be very quiet and follow Mommy and me closely. As they gathered their few belongings, Emma knelt in front of Chloe, brushing back her hair. Remember, sweetie, we're going to be a new family now. You're Lily Harris, and I'm Emily, okay? Chloe nodded slowly, her small face serious. And you're still my mommy and daddy? Always, Oliver assured her. No matter what names we use. They packed up quickly, the tension palpable. Emma's contact had provided a route to a backroad crossing point into Canada, where a smuggler would help them get across. The drive would take several hours, most of it along deserted roads. They couldn't afford any mistakes. As they stepped outside, the cold morning air hit them, sharp and bracing. Marcus was waiting by the van, his face lined with fatigue but focused. I'll drive you to the drop-off point, he said. "Once you cross the border, you're on your own." Oliver placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Thank you for everything." Marcus gave a brief nod, his expression unreadable. "Just make it count, Oliver. Get them to safety." They climbed into the van, Chloe nestled between Oliver and Emma in the back seat. The drive was quiet, the only sounds the low hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. Chloe clutched her stuffed animal tightly, her eyes darting around as if trying to understand the enormity of what was happening. As the hours passed, the landscape grew more desolate, the trees thicker and more imposing. Finally, Marcus slowed the van as they approached a narrow dirt road marked by an old wooden signpost, barely visible through the thick mist. "This is it," he announced. "From here, it's about a half-hour walk to the crossing point. The smuggler will meet you at the clearing and take you the rest of the way." Oliver turned to Julia, who had been silent throughout the drive. "This is goodbye, then." Julia's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. "Just stay safe, okay? And give Chloe the life she deserves." "I will," Oliver promised. "Thank you, Julia, for everything." Julia hugged Chloe tightly, her voice choked. "Be brave, little one. You're going to have a wonderful new life." Chloe hugged her back, her small voice muffled. "I will, Aunt Julia." Emma embraced Julia next, her face a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "Take care of yourself," she said softly. "We couldn't have done this without you." With final goodbyes exchanged, Oliver, Emma, and Chloe stepped out of the van. The air was colder here, and the forest loomed darkly around them. Marcus handed Oliver a small backpack filled with supplies for the journey ahead. "Go quickly," he urged. "And remember, keep off the main paths." Oliver nodded, his eyes steady. "We won't forget." With that, the three of them began walking down the narrow path, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. Oliver kept a firm hold on Chloe's hand, while Emma carried the backpack. The forest was eerily silent, every rustle and distant sound making their hearts race. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. A man with a thick beard and rugged clothes stood there, his expression wary. "Logan, Emily, and Lily Harris?" he asked, his voice gruff. "Yes," Oliver answered. The man nodded. "Follow me. Keep your heads down and don't make a sound. The crossing point is a quarter-mile away." They followed him closely, Chloe's small legs struggling to keep up. Oliver scooped her into his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. The smuggler led them through dense underbrush, moving quickly but silently. Suddenly, distant voices broke the silence. Oliver's heart leapt into his throat. The smuggler cursed under his breath, motioning for them to crouch low. "Border Patrol," he whispered. "Stay here." The voices grew louder, accompanied by the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel. Oliver held Chloe tightly, his entire body tense. Emma's eyes were wide with fear, her hand gripping Oliver's arm. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity, but the footsteps eventually faded. The smuggler reappeared, his face grim. "They're moving away. Let's go now." They hurried forward, every step feeling like a leap into the unknown. Finally, they reached the border, a small, shallow river that marked the dividing line between the two countries. "Cross quickly," the smuggler instructed. "Once you're on the other side, follow the trail to the cabin marked with a blue flag. There'll be a vehicle waiting to take you further." Oliver, Emma, and Chloe waded into the icy water, its chill biting at their legs. Chloe shivered in Oliver's arms, but he whispered, "Almost there, baby. We're almost there." They reached the opposite bank, panting and soaked. The smuggler watched from the other side, giving a brief wave before disappearing back into the forest. Oliver turned to Emma, his voice filled with both exhaustion and hope. "We did it. We're across." Emma's eyes filled with tears, her face breaking into a smile for the first time in days. "Yes, we did." Chloe looked up at them, her expression one of confusion mixed with relief. "Are we safe now?" Oliver crouched down, pulling Chloe into a tight embrace. "We're safe, Chloe. We're safe." Emma joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. In that moment, the cold, the fear, and the uncertainty seemed to melt away. replaced by a fragile but undeniable sense of victory. They had crossed the border. It wasn't the end of their journey, but it was a new beginning. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt real. As they made their way toward the cabin, Oliver knew the road ahead would still be long and fraught with challenges. But together, as a family, they had already overcome the impossible. And now, finally, they had a chance to build the life they had fought so hard to reach. The cabin was nestled deep in the Canadian woods, its rustic exterior worn by years of harsh winters. It was small but sturdy, built to withstand both the elements and, hopefully, the dark past that Oliver, Emma, and Chloe were trying to leave behind. As they approached, they spotted a blue flag fluttering from a nearby tree, a welcome sign that they had arrived at the right place. Inside, the cabin was simple: a few worn pieces of furniture, a wood-burning stove, and a small table with a kerosene lamp. It was a stark contrast to the chaos they had fled, but it felt like a sanctuary. Oliver set down the backpack and immediately began checking the windows, making sure everything was secure. Emma settled Chloe onto an old couch, wrapping a thick blanket around her small frame. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Chloe asked, her voice still tinged with a child's uncertainty. Emma knelt beside her, stroking her hair gently. "No, sweetheart. This is just for a little while. We'll find a better place soon." Chloe's eyes searched Emma's face, trying to understand. "But we'll all be together, right?" Emma's eyes softened. "Yes, Chloe. Always together." Oliver joined them, sitting down beside Chloe. "This is the start of something new," he said, his voice filled with both exhaustion and hope. "We may have to move a few more times, but the important thing is that we're free now." Chloe's face lit up at the word free, as if it carried a kind of magic she had yet to understand fully. She hugged Oliver tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck. "I'm glad we're free, Daddy." The next few days passed slowly, with Oliver and Emma keeping a close watch on their surroundings. The cabin was well hidden, and the smuggler's instructions had been clear. Stay put until they were contacted again with details about new identities and a safe route to a permanent home. They received a satellite phone with one saved contact, a person who would arrange the final leg of their escape. The waiting was nerve-wracking, but there was also a strange sense of calm that settled over the small family. One afternoon, as the late autumn sun filtered through the dense canopy of trees, Emma pulled Oliver aside. "We should talk," she said, her voice serious but gentle. Oliver looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of anticipation and hesitation. "What's on your mind?" Emma took a deep breath. "About everything that happened. I need you to know how sorry I am for leaving the way I did. I thought I was protecting you and Chloe, but I see now that I made things worse." Oliver's gaze was steady, though a flicker of pain crossed his face. "I understand why you did it, Emma. It's hard to hear, but I get it now. You were trying to save her, and in your own way, me too." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But I should have trusted you more. I should have let you in, instead of pushing you away." Oliver reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "What matters now is that we're here, together. We've been given a second chance, and I don't want to waste it." Emma nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "Neither do I." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of Chloe's laughter coming from outside. They turned to see her chasing a butterfly through the small clearing in front of the cabin, her giggles filling the crisp air. It was a sound neither Oliver nor Emma had heard for far too long, a sound that brought a sense of normalcy and hope they hadn't dared to expect. "She's resilient," Oliver said quietly, watching Chloe. "After everything she's been through, she's still able to find joy." Emma's voice was filled with awe. "She's stronger than I ever imagined." That night, they received a call on the satellite phone. It was the smuggler's contact, a woman with a no-nonsense voice who went by the name Nora. "Your new documents are ready," she said. "I'll meet you at the rendezvous point tomorrow night. Be there by sundown." Oliver confirmed the plan, his heart pounding with both relief and anticipation. He hung up and turned to Emma, who was watching him expectantly. "We have our final step," he said. "Tomorrow night, we leave for good." Emma's eyes lit up with hope, but there was also a flicker of apprehension. What if something goes wrong? Oliver's expression was firm. We've come too far, Emma. We can't let fear hold us back now. The following day was filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. They packed what little they had, making sure Chloe understood the importance of staying quiet and following their lead. As evening approached, they set out, the dense woods gradually thinning as they made their way toward the rendezvous point. When they reached the clearing, Nora was waiting by a nondescript SUV. She was tall and serious-looking, her face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. "You're right on time," she said, her voice efficient. "Get in." Oliver, Emma, and Chloe climbed into the vehicle, the weight of the moment settling over them. Nora handed Oliver a folder containing their final documents, birth certificates, passports, and a small envelope filled with cash. "This will get you started," she said. "You'll have enough to rent a place and get settled. After that, you're on your own." Oliver took the folder, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you. We owe you everything." Nora's expression remained stoic. "Just keep moving and don't look back. The organization you escaped from doesn't give up easily. But if you're smart, you can stay ahead." As they drove toward the border of a small Canadian town, Chloe dozed off in Emma's lap, exhausted from the journey. Emma stroked her hair gently, her face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We really made it, didn't we?" she whispered, almost as if she couldn't believe it herself. Oliver nodded, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "Yes, we did." When they reached the town, Nora dropped them off near a small motel. "This is where we part ways," she said. "Good luck." Oliver helped Emma and Chloe out of the SUV, giving Nora a final nod of gratitude. "We'll make this work." "I hope so," Nora replied, before driving off into the night. Standing under the neon glow of the motel sign, Oliver looked at Emma and Chloe, his heart swelling with both relief and love. They were free. The past was behind them, and a new future awaited. They checked into the small motel room, the simplicity of it feeling like a luxury after everything they had been through. As they settled in, Chloe crawled onto one of the beds, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Can we stay here forever?" she asked, her voice soft and innocent. Emma smiled, tucking her in. "Not here, but we'll find a home soon. A real home." Oliver sat beside Chloe, taking her hand. "We'll be okay, Chloe. We'll have a home, a new life. And we'll always be together." Chloe's eyes fluttered closed, her breathing becoming slow and steady. Emma and Oliver sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they'd endured slowly giving way to a fragile peace. Oliver took Emma's hand, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We made it this far. We can do anything now." Emma squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with both love and resolve. "Yes, we can." In the quiet of the night, with the promise of a new beginning just within reach, Oliver, Emma, and Chloe finally allowed themselves to rest. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was a road they would walk together. And that was all that mattered.